Welcome to the Gray Range Podcast. My name is David Rousseau. We're going to explore the poetry of how we live, how we learn, and how we find our way along this strange path we call life. If you're curious about people, their stories, and all things savage and wonderful, join me on the Gray Range. We're back.
We are.
Another episode of the Gray Range Podcast.
Fucking matching T-shirts and everything.
Oh yeah, we're wearing the new merch, the new
So
swag.
let's see here if I can.
See if we can show it off on the camera. You're wearing the
It's better in person.
the torched mics, the Viking shirt that was designed by I can't suddenly remember his name. Our guy who did our website for us, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I really need this Jocko, just Jocko Go here with all the nootropics.
Yeah.
Fire my brain up. But yeah, we got some new merch in the web store. Some cool stuff.
Yeah, I saw the pictures of the hoodie that you posted there. That looks pretty legit.
Yeah, that's something
good.
that's pretty cool. We'll have more cool stuff coming if anybody's interested in that sort of thing. But it's a wild world out there, man. It's a lot of crazy stuff. So I don't know how much putting T-shirts and stuff into the world makes something any better. But podcasting isn't free. Equipment isn't free. I definitely like to make some upgrades over time. And if people want to support, they can get us at www.thegrayrange.com. So we'll get all the paying the bills out of the way right off the bat.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll remind you at the end, too.
Absolutely. And started off with a piece called Angels for Lions. Where is my paradise? Where is my brave new world? What I see here is a hunting ground. No heaven, only prey. We used words and thought we knew their meaning. We built things that made our purpose clear. Only after the Holocaust did we see we had it backwards. The angels didn't receive us. The world was ripped and ravaged. We were sold a dream of revelations. We respected consequence as a matter of course, saying, we are not governed by celestial collective. Turns out we were wrong. Every firing neuron blinks as if a star, and we all move in tandem with the cosmic dust. We thought we were the fox inside the hen house, but we were not the gods that we thought we were. Bought another Black Friday trinket, mind shackle in a basket, from everlasting to everlasting, not satisfied since the last thing, that high-minded mouthpiece, that fucking line repeating that this might be the last time we can question or change our angle of ascension. We've been wrong up until now. It might make sense just to sit down and admit we're out in the unknown. We're afraid that we're all alone in the darkest place between the stars. Maybe it is. Maybe we are. Out of control. Always will be. Space and time, they are nature too. Like the wind, like the scent of blood. Heaven is a hunting ground. How well equipped are we now? Will we bring the big game down? Or will we be food for the pride? There are lions stalking us everywhere, all the time. Yeah, it's a different world, man.
Yeah.
I think
that's kind of a trip that kind of took me everywhere from, with this materialistic society we live in all the way to like, fuck it, let's fly to Mars.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I often think about is when we think about the natural world and we think of nature, we think about like these elemental forces, like the things we see on planet Earth. We think of the trees, the earth, the ground, the dirt, the water. We think of that as nature, but that's only because we are viewing the world through what we see. in my mind, that like the whole universe, that's nature too.
Oh, for
All
sure.
the planets, all the solar systems, asteroids, other planets, like that's natural. That's a part of like a bigger cosm of nature, the cosmological part of nature. And even the universe itself is natural. Like it exists in the form it exists in. It's not, changed by us in any way.
I think that's just kind of people tend to overlook that because they're human, right? They're always on the front line of whatever's in front of them. And that's about as far as it goes. They don't really give it a whole lot of deeper thought.
Yeah. The most important thing is the most important thing to you at that moment.
Yeah.
Right. If you're lost your keys, you're late for work, your kid is sick, you're dealing with debt or whatever. That's like the most important thing in your life. That's the most important thing in your world.
Yeah.
And everything else that's happening around, be it orders of magnitude bigger or maybe orders of magnitude smaller, doesn't really affect your mind state. You're kind of locked into your thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's and I think now
these things do a really good job of narrowing our worldview, right?
Yeah,
it's easy to get sucked into that.
Yeah, and letting us, it kind of tricks us into thinking that we're seeing this broader viewpoint, but in actuality, it's really narrowing what we're seeing, really tying everything to that algorithm, right? What we're being fed. And I see a lot of that right now with the way the world is and the way people choose their viewpoints, because people tend to jump on viewpoints that are opposed to their other viewpoint pretty quickly. I think when we call people hypocrites, we always say like, well, you can't be a hypocrite, right? You got to believe what you say and say what you believe. But I think being a hypocrite is part of human beings learning. Like we go from one thing to another thing. I think we're all a hypocrite about something, right? We have rules for ourselves or rules for other people that we don't hold ourselves to.
If you were never a hypocrite and your opinion never evolved, then you'd be a pretty, I don't know, you're an NPC. You're just this mindless. Yeah. I don't know, man.
But I think if you don't catch yourself on it, like that's part of it. Like if you're not aware that, hey, I hold this viewpoint. Like you see a lot of that in the gun control idea, right? Where it's like, well, I should be free to own whatever I want, and then we'll look at somebody from maybe an opposing viewpoint, or somebody who's out to do harm. Or like, well, why didn't they get fucking arrested or something like that? Like, why didn't the law come down on them, or why isn't there laws against this? Even people that are like the most libertarian, small government people, when people that they don't like start moving and acting, they'll be like, well, why? How come the government didn't step in? Like, well, you're the guy who doesn't want the government stepping into anything. But
for sure.
But we change our viewpoints based on what's affecting us at that moment, right?
Well, I think it's easy to accuse people of being hypocritical because often they are. I mean, it's kind of funny, this whole 51st state thing, and you got all the people that voted for gun control and were okay with it, and now a lot of those same personalities on X are actively saying, well, we had fight an insurgency, and you're like, with what? That's that hypocritical, like on but maybe it also means that their viewpoint is changing for the positive too, right? Like, so you can't, when you accuse somebody and label them as being a hypocrite, especially if they have an opposing viewpoint, I don't think it's productive to hammer them on it. Like you might recognize their hypocrisy, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad.
Yeah.
So
I think a case in point is there was a picture floating around on social media with an African American dad showing his son how to shoot. So basically, his son's got like an AK.
Yep.
And originally, the pro 2A, the pro gun movement is like, that's fantastic, love to see it. And then they realize that he's wearing a hat with a black nationalist symbol, right? And all of a sudden, this zeitgeist gets inserted into the conversation, where it's like, well, if he's of this political stripe, that means he's against this political stripe, right? So
suddenly they'd be happy to take his Second Amendment away.
It's kind of like that, right? Yeah. And seeing somebody being triggered by a symbol, and that guy may or may not have beliefs tied to that philosophy or that belief system, But in my mind, it's the same thing as some other symbology on the right, where people might think that it's implied violence, right? So they see a symbol and they think, well, that's implied violence against my group, right? And I think we see a lot of that these days.
Well, you got to remember too that social media is like, that is the circus for rage farming. Like it's literally, there's people that will look at every picture, every post, and then figure out a way to rage farm, to get everybody all like wound up about it.
Yeah.
And that's how that stuff happens. It goes from, oh, cool, this guy's showing his kid how to shoot, and right on, he's, that's his God-given right and this and that, to getting a bunch of people activated against him. And there's personalities they exist strictly to do that, man.
But so. I think it's interesting that symbology can be used to elicit similar responses in two different groups.
For sure. Absolutely.
Right? It's the star-bellied sneeches.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's, he's got a star and you don't have a star, and, you got to get a star. Well, he's got 2 stars, right? Like, so there's that kind of programming and that kind of triggering.
Right. And then Buddy the Dude, he packs up the machine and he leaves with all their money.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. And that's it. In the end,
in
the end, the power structure wins. The power structure that you were against because you didn't want, legislation against your Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden has tricked both groups into saying, well, yeah, you should take away his guns, or these people shouldn't be allowed these rights. And the same thing with freedom of speech, right? It's, I see the same thing with protests that are happening right now, and you'll have one group protest, and it's like, they're a bunch of terrorists and this and that and the other thing, and then the next group will go and protest. It's, well, they're a bunch of terrorists, and it's like each one wants the government to crack down on the other, not realizing that just empowers the government to crack down on everybody more.
That's right.
So, it's a strange world we live in, man.
People like their chains, man.
We're so easily tricked and programmed, and it's funny to watch, like disappointing and terrifying to watch at the same time. But we don't seem to be immune to it. There doesn't seem to be.
No, I think that's just humans in general. I think we're kind of fucking dumb.
Sure.
We have some great people and we have some leaders in society that kind of rise above that. But I think that it's that 10-80-10 thing. It's always in play. Any given issue, 10% of people, they will 100% oppose it as though it means life or death. There's 10% that will fight for it at the opposite end. And then that 80 in the middle, they're 50-50. They could go one way or the other. They're going to go one way or the other, but it's kind of a toss-up.
Kind of depending on that. Yeah.
So what it means is like, 90, well, at least 50 to 60 to 90% of the people are always kind of like going to be taken advantage of in that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much nuance in, like, there's so much information out there right now, and there's so much money being made off the pervasive amount of information, like with social media, to the point now where people are just like using AI to manufacture content that's nothing.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I've noticed, I think it's on Facebook, on my Facebook account, I've noticed whole accounts that are meme accounts.
Yeah.
But when I look at the memes, they're not real. They're AI generated. So like the text doesn't actually mean anything. Like it's words or letters put together, but it's meant to look like a meme.
Yep.
But it's all fake. And there's accounts that are just generating tons and tons of this stuff because clicks equal money. Right? So people are just farming and like engagement farming. And we don't a lot of the time take the time to sit down and go, oh, hey, this is the why of.
Well, sure. And you have to understand that you're the product that's for sale there, because if you're the guy clicking on it, you're selling your information, you're selling your habits if they're trying to figure out how to target you.
Yeah. And I think when people, I guess more, you talk about the, on the political end, when they try to talk about the nuance, when they try to bring in information, like real information. It's like, hey, well, look at this study or look at this book that describes what's happening. Like, I was just reading a post this morning by Leslyn Lewis, MP for the Conservative Party. Yeah. Ran for the leadership a few years ago. It was actually the only time I ever bought a membership in a political party. Never renewed it after that, was to vote for her for leadership.
Yeah.
I thought she had some really, really good ideas coming at it from as an environmental lawyer, somebody who'd come to Canada and kind of walked into this, establishment from an outside perspective. But all that aside, she was talking about, this, what we were talking about earlier with the Canada, the 51st state.
Yeah.
And she kind of mentioned that she'd been reading some books about technocracy. So back in the early 1900s to the 1940s, I think it was, there was a movement to basically establish a North American Union based on technology. So based on science and based on economics and innovation.
Yeah.
And it included Greenland and Canada and all the way down to parts of like South and Central America. And Elon Musk's grandfather was actually involved in this movement.
Okay.
So there's these kind of, if you look at where these ideas come from, they don't come from a vacuum, right? They come from somewhere. And this technocracy idea, and she mentioned the book, but I'll put it in the description. Check it out if people want to check it out.
Yeah.
I'll probably throw the link up from her Substack onto the Instagram so people can check it out. But it's interesting that when we look at these ideas, like there's nothing new under the sun, right? A lot of these are old ideas that are brought about every so often. When you look at it, it's all about consolidating power.
Yeah.
It's all about consolidating influence. It's the same people that are involved, at least generationally, the same interests that are involved generationally that are scheming all the time, right?
And as technology advances, some of these ideas that seemed far-fetched and unreal at one point in the timeline,
right,
they become, it's more probable that it can be pulled off. And that's why it keeps resurfacing, because you'll get this idea there's no way it's going to happen. Like we're not interplanetary. We're not going to Mars. Well, guess what? By 2040, there will probably be people on Mars.
Yeah.
And that would have been like, a far out concept not that long ago. But as technology advances, and again, that's not like a real conspiracy based thing, but that's like just an example of how technology can take you there. And same thing with this, the idea of the 51st state. I mean, that's the whole manifest destiny and all it's been a long time since I read that. And
oh yeah,
like grade 9 social studies, but
yeah. And if I mean, you got to go back to that late 90s, early 2000s Alex Jones thing where like a lot of people looked at it as conspiracy theory, but it like the Council of Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, Bilderberg Group, like all these sort of things, Davos, like these exist. These are think tanks where people sit down and they plan the plot and course of the world, right? So I think you're right. I think there's some inevitability to humanity's ascension technologically, be it through, I think AI is part and parcel to that. I think we need AI if we're going to leave the planet, simply because you need some sort of super powerful computer to do the math for any kind of interstellar travel. Like if you look at like old Star Trek and stuff like that, I think it's the Next Generation. They talk to the computer a lot.
Yeah.
They get the computer to plot us a course to wherever, right? Like they're not doing it. The AI is doing it.
Yeah.
Right. The AI is figuring out, because otherwise you're going to smash into an asteroid or some shit like that, right?
For sure.
You need something that thinks 1 billion times faster than a human being in order to do these things. And human progress is going to be going leaps and bounds. But once the genie's out of the bottle, it's who is positioned to take that power, to harness it, to wrangle it, and they're the new leader, right? They hold the conch on the island now, right? It's like
flies.
Yeah, well, essentially that's what it becomes, right?
Sure
like we're all, this is an island, and that's where we're at. But I mean, I think that like that piece, that Angels for Lions, it's like we're always looking for angels. We're looking for people who are doing good for good's sake, right? We're looking for these benevolent people who are holding power, be it our political leaders, be it our cultural leaders, be it our, technocrats, and we want to think they've got, humanity's, best interest at heart. But none of them do, and none of them ever have. It's like nowhere. And we had one guy in human history
Yeah.
Like one dude, right?
I think it's because man is fallible, right? It's that
infinitely corruptible, and
for sure.
And we tend to fall in love with our own ideas,
and prone to sin, right? Like just
pride,
like it just is what it is. And
right?
It's really, I think it's really hard for anybody to kind of. It's the rare individual that rises to a position of great power and does good with it.
Yeah. Well, and normally we kill that guy.
Yes.
Right. Because he's not like, if he's in it for altruistic reasons, then we're probably going to bury that. Like it becomes the free energy, the car that runs on water, like how many of these technologies have existed over time. Like, I don't know, anecdotally, I haven't done the math, but watched a few documentaries on it. Tends to get squashed pretty quick, right?
Sure does.
It seems on several points in human history, we could have stepped into something much different, a different kind of future, a different kind of timeline.
Yeah.
But there's just so much money and power involved that people are just like, no. We're always looking for angels, but we get lions, right? We're looking for heaven, but what we find is, like, if you think about hunting, like some of the stuff I was talking about, Ben Broshew's had this video series on his YouTube about this sheep hunt that they were on. And some of the most beautiful, majestic mountain vistas I've ever seen. You know, they're hiking over ranges into these untouched valleys, and it looks like a slice of heaven.
Yeah.
But they're not there to enjoy it. They're there to kill something.
That's right.
Right? Like, and I know there are people who hike just to take the pictures. They're going to shoot pictures, not creatures, right? But I think that drive, that's part of the human drive, right? Like, I'm going to get there, and if I find something that I can kill and eat, I'm going to kill it and eat it, mount it on my wall, right?
I think it's important to point out then also that it doesn't mean that all that is not enjoyed along the way. The scenery, all of that is like it's kind of like
that's our place in this
friends
in the
with
system.
Benefits kind of thing. It's that side, whatever you call it, side benefit.
Well, sure. I mean, the other predator creatures that are out there, the bear, the wolf, the coyote, the fox, the marten, the lynx, the weasel, the whatever. I don't think, I mean, I can't put myself into the animal mind, but I don't think they ever sit back and go, whoa, that's beautiful. Like, that's an amazing view. Look at that sunset, right? I think that's a perfectly human thing.
Yeah.
So I think we can go there and we can appreciate that, but yet we are still in that ecosystem. We are still a predator in that ecosystem, right?
Well, we're also prey in that ecosystem too.
100%.
So it's kind of that.
Yeah. But I think, that's just part of that cycle. And I think there's some truths that are, like, they're true yesterday, they're true today, they're going to be true tomorrow. And with all this technology and all this access that we have, it's easy for us to get overwhelmed with truths, right? Things that are potentially true, or things that could be true, or this person's opinion that they're selling is truth.
Right. And I think people do a poor job of managing that, as far as like, there's lots of true things out there. Lots of truths will be coming at you at the speed of Wi-Fi. It doesn't mean it matters.
Yep.
Right? Like, it doesn't, all this stuff going on, but
I'm going to change one thing.
Yeah. We'll edit this out. It's way less harsh.
Yeah, I was looking at the camera. Blown right out.
Yeah, I think people do a poor job of managing that, because it doesn't matter. Just because you know something or become aware of it doesn't mean you have any power to affect it, or that it should upset you or even really get you wound up.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a lot of that. Like, I'm a huge fan of, like, I like a conspiracy theory as much as the next person.
Oh, same.
Like, I like to, but for me, it's entertainment. Call it infotainment, much like the news, right?
Yeah.
There's a shred of mystery there that's legitimate. It's like the whole Ancient Aliens thing, right? Series that's on the History Channel or whatever. My wife's always like, why the hell do you watch that dumb show? Because I'm always making fun of it, right? As they're like talking about, like, oh, who could have done it? It must have been. I'm like, yeah, like, there's, like, we have no answer, but they just go directly to aliens all the time.
Yeah.
Even if it's like a really like banal answer that totally was within the realm of like ancient human technology. They're just like, oh, it's aliens. But there is a shred of mystery. So there's like, we don't know.
Yeah.
So those archaeological and historical mysteries are interesting to me. And the fact that they just plug aliens in as the answer for everything to me is just comedy.
Well, I'm sure Rogan isn't the only one who's brought it up, but you look at some of the ancient civilizations, and another group comes to visit or trade or whatever, everybody gets sick and dies. So
Sure.
you could have these very greatly advanced, technologically capable people that just got wiped out by disease, right? So it doesn't mean that it's
natural disaster or anything like
for sure,
because the cosmos is part of that natural cycle, right? A comet, an asteroid.
Well, look at Pompeii, right?
Yeah.
Okay, volcano erupts, boom, covers an entire city in ash, preserves it. Okay, that's one that they found, but there's all kinds of buried cities and towns out there that are.
Oh yeah, like an eruption like Mount St. Helens.
Yeah.
Like there just didn't happen to be a city nearby, like that close.
Otherwise, it'd be gone. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these things happen all the time, but it forms our opinions on the past, and stuff happens like in this day and age that, there's, I think the biggest ones are earthquakes and tsunamis, but
yeah,
I mean, if you're living in the American like tornado alley or whatever like that, man, nature is a big part of your day to day, right? Like the idea of like apocalyptic destruction isn't like it happened 10,000 years ago. It's like it happened last year and it'll probably happen again this year.
Yeah, like if you live in some of those places, like you will encounter it at least generationally. Like it'll happen when you're a kid, and it'll happen to your, like every generation it's going to happen.
Yeah, like for us in Alberta, we've got like the Black Friday, like the big tornado that went through Edmonton.
That's right. Yeah,
and then we still talk about that. That's still like in the psyche of people in Edmonton who lived there at the time. But if you're living basically from like North Texas all the way to like Illinois, like
there's got to be a twister.
Yeah, at least one a year. Like it's pretty wild, man. But yeah, we have our place there, but we're in a crazy time, with Trump's election, our own Canadian politics being just a
long show of
absolute
fuckery,
like I don't know. Dumpster fire seems to be coming up quite a bit, and I'm like, it's pretty accurate as to what's going on right now.
Monday's coming, right? So that's Inauguration Day on the 20th here, coming right up. And Danielle Smith is down there, obviously our premier. Yeah. It's interesting, like they had that meeting the other day with all the premiers, and she was the only one who didn't sign it because she's not really interested in pursuing retaliatory tariffs against Trump. Like there's a lot going on there.
That would affect Alberta disproportionately to the rest of the nation, right? And I get it. I think I don't think the people who've been in charge are doing a good job. I don't think there's any secret to that. We've had enough discussions about what we think the Trudeau regime has done for the country up to this point. I'm to the point now where I'm like, we could elect anybody in there. It could be the best orator, the best policy guy or girl or whoever. Is it even fixable at this point? Like it's so bad.
Here's what's wrong. It's or one of the many things that's wrong is the very fact that you have this council of people getting together, figuring out how they're going to go like wage a trade war with the U.S.
Yeah.
Like, with all due respect, are they fucking retarded? It's not a war that can be won. This is not something where it's like, oh, he's going to 25% tariffs. Well, we're going to tariff all of our stuff too. It's like, are you stupid? All you had to do is fix immigration and fix the border. That's it. He's not asking.
To be fair, they're going to have the RCMP and 2 Blackhawks.
Which is
like the 7,000 mile border or whatever we've got.
Right. So how did the RCMP, ? Get Blackhawk helicopters? Like,
I don't know, because our military doesn't have them. So
right, who's like, that's odd. But they are a paramilitary force. They're not like
sure, they're a state-run paramilitary
for sure.
that just happens to be tasked with law enforcement.
Right. So I get it, but you would think that'd be more of a military thing coming into this country. But the RCMP buying military helicopters is kind of like and drones. I mean, it's
yeah. Well, from what I understand, this CBSA is woefully understaffed. So Canadian Border Services, are like woefully understaffed, and that's been kind of a thing for a long time. I don't think it's so long that it hasn't been on anybody's radar. I think the last time anybody tried to secure the border was in like the 1800s when we built the railway to keep the Americans out.
And it's no wonder that they're understaffed. I mean, if you fly through any airport where the CBSA is manning it, I mean, you look at who gets flagged and who gets pulled off for security screening.
Yeah, it's theater.
It for sure it is. It's like, okay, it's a guy on a business trip who,
it's me every time, but I'm on all the lists, so whatever. Like, I don't really care.
I'm like, okay, so I'm the guy getting pulled, and you take a look around, and it's like, I'm the least,
either of us,
I've been profiled.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like to the point now where it's like, I'm so ready when I get to security. Like I got my belt, boots, and everything off. Like everything's in the bins. I got like 3 bins full of stuff, and I'm just like, okay, just walk through. And they still body scan me, and I'm like, I really don't care at this point. It's security theater. I dislike it because we're okay with the theater. Like we're okay with, that level of infringement on our personal sovereignty, but it's extended well beyond that, right? So it's that kind of security. It's
troublesome because what you're doing is you're watching your tax dollars being burnt in real time. You're like, really? Like, what a joke.
Yeah.
It's your taxes that are funding and propping all that up, and it's not doing anything. It's just it's another government job. Like, it adds to the numbers. Like, we employed this many people this year. Okay. Like, what are they doing? Nothing.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily making air travel any safer. I mean, one of those things that I've always,
it's not adding to the GDP.
No. And the air travel is just one of those systems that's like so dependent on everything in the system working perfectly all the time.
Yeah.
So like, how many thousands of flights are in the air at any given time. Every one of those aircraft requires a certain amount of maintenance, requires a certain amount of training to fly, the timing, air traffic control, weather, like so many variables go into that worldwide network of planes in the air and keeping them up there and getting up and getting down safely and all that stuff. Like that's a system, and systems are prone to entropy. They're prone to they're going to break down over time. So you have to have your level of maintenance, your level of input has to be greater than the amount of burn off entropy.
Yeah.
So you have to be maintaining the planes faster than they're breaking down, because they can't break down when they're in the air. So the past few years that I've been flying, I'm just like, these guys are doing a heck of a job. People are doing, like, these airlines are doing a heck of a job, but I don't feel that the amount of input is keeping that at bay. I think eventually there's going to be some horrific breakdown. I mean,
for sure.
And it's like, oh man, do I really want to fly? I've heard some stories about pilots that are like, no, we drive.
Yeah.
Like, I drive my family. I don't care if it's a 2-day drive. Like, if I'm not flying for work, my family's in the car. Like,
to be fair to those guys, they're probably sick of flying too.
Yeah. That's true.
It's a nice change too.
That's true. When I drove for a living, you drive 6 days a week or 10 days straight. You get days off. So I'm like, hey, let's drive to BC. Like, I'm not driving 10 hours after driving all day, every day. That's why I quit driving. One of the reasons I quit driving for a living, I was just like, I like to drive for fun. And when I'm doing it for work, it just ruins it for me. Like, I don't want to spend more time on the road. I mean, you're rolling the dice every time, right? Automobile travel is infinitely more dangerous than air travel statistically.
It's the most dangerous thing we do every day.
Yeah, 100%. And that was the main reason why I quit driving for a living. I was just like, you can't pay me enough to die on one of these roads, and someone will fill my seat the next day. No one will care.
That's right.
No one will bat an eye.
Yeah.
Right. It'll just be like, yeah, truck got written off. He's dead. All right. Buy a new truck, get a new driver. No one's going to build a statue for you in the middle of town.
No. Like just that container load needs to go today.
Yeah. There's no memorials to truck drivers.
No.
There's no National Truck Driver Awareness Safety Day or anything like that. Like, it's like that on the industrial side, right?
Yeah.
If you're a cop or a fireman or a soldier and you die in combat or die saving someone from a burning building, they'll name a friggin' street after you.
Yeah.
But if you die, building a tank farm for some oil field company, they'll just replace you like the next day, man.
Yep. That's
pay off whoever they got to pay off to go back to work. And
yep.
Yeah, it's wild, man.
So what do you think? I don't know what headlines you're reading, but what do you think of Western separation? Like, it seems like that's coming up a lot lately, as far as or at least Alberta. This whole 51st state thing. It's like, it seems like it's gaining traction. I'm just curious what your thoughts on that are. I'll full disclosure, I don't care if the country comes apart, like Canada. I don't really care about it. I'm not saying that I want to be part of the States, but I could see Alberta as like a constitutional republic, and I'm fine with that. Which might seem for some people like shocking, but for me, Canada isn't this dreamy place of it's not what it was when I was a kid, and I just don't see how it would ever stay together, given what it is. It's too big to be ruled by the Laurentian elite, and I think people in the West are kind of sick of it. Now, but I also want to clarify that I'm not on the side to burn it down. It's cool if we can make it work, but I'm also okay if it doesn't. I just wonder where you're at with that whole kind of
Yeah, that's I think I touched on it in our last podcast with Mike there. Growing up, I'd heard about it. Heard about this Western independence. We didn't really have any traction. I think it was kind of more of a Southern Alberta thing, kind of around Calgary, that kind of area. Back when Calgary was ultra conservative, cowboy country, stuff like that, right? And probably in the 70s, early 80s. And then I think it was maybe 2010 or something like that. It started to kind of crop up again. People started talking about it, but it wasn't the same people talking about it. It was academics talking about it.
Yeah.
It was political scientists from UC, U of A talking about it. It was some big time industry people who were talking about it. And I was like, oh, okay, so this isn't something that's spoken of on Sunday afternoon at the co-op coffee shop or the gas station, those places where farmers sit around and have coffee.
Yep.
It was something that was being talked about in the media. It's starting to gain some traction. And I think that when you look at the business interests, the financial interests, the straight economics of it,
yeah, to
me,
Alberta
does get a raw deal from Confederation. And there's something much like the airline thing, right? A country is a system. And if effort isn't going into maintaining it and constantly improving it, because if you're not improving, you're dying, right? If you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And if that isn't done and it isn't maintained, and it seems like since I was a kid, like you were talking about till now, it's less of a coast to coast thing and much more regional, right? So, and I don't think anybody can argue that. You go to,
it just seems from a financial and economic standpoint, we're in a terribly abusive relationship. And we keep trying to please everybody in Canada. We're okay that, we send billions and billions and billions of dollars from our economy into the rest of the country to prop it up and they never support, whether it's pipelines to get to port so that we can take our products globally. The rest of the country always fucks us when it comes to that. Not your regular people, but the rest of the political elite in the country, all the various levels of government. It's and we just keep spending and giving money away, just trying to it's kind of okay, they beat us up and then they're okay, but we love you. And we come back and they beat us up again and we just keep spending money. It's at some point we're going to have to grow up and just say, you know what, we're going to keep our money and look after us. Like, you could immediately get rid of all the income tax in
Sure.
Alberta. There's all these things you could do to immediately improve the quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely true. What I see, because I get the analogy, but from what I see is the leadership is bad. Canada, since its confederation, we agreed that Ottawa, was going to be the hub of our governing, our government. That's where everything's going to come from. But I still think that, I think the Liberals especially, and I was thinking about this earlier today, there's a point at which all politics in the West, so except for the United States is its own thing, but all politics in the West stemmed from Europe, right? So when we were talking about places like the Bilderberg Group in Davos and stuff like that, these big think tanks, well, they're trying to decide like the whole direction the world's going to go. And those groups are comprised of the same interests from colonial Europe, right? So the same, we don't think about like kings and queens anymore, but most of them now are corporations. Like the Shell Corporation is the Dutch royal family, right? So corporations stepped in where royalty kind of left. And so all the money and power is still in the same hands, or at least in the hands of the same interests.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of our direction comes from. Or it has up until now. I think now is probably the first time where people are looking at that through that American lens of manifest destiny, right? We don't need to be connected to this old world colonial idea, because I think that's the problem with Canada is the East still treats the West like colonies.
Yeah.
Right? And instead of sending the money back to Britain or back to France or whatever, which I still think they're doing to some degree, just in a different way.
Sure, whether they funnel it all through the Ukraine or wherever it goes.
Yeah, instead of letting the Spanish and the French come and take all the fish on the East Coast, it's we'll sell them grain at cheap prices or whatever's happening. I don't pretend to understand really anything. I'm going to say this qualified. I am a know-nothing nobody, but I can talk a lot of shit, and I tend to think a lot. So, but when you're talking about like Western separation or Alberta separation, I think Canada as it stands can't be held together. I think it's the system that runs it, the system that was built to keep it together, is kind of coming apart at the seams.
Yeah.
The interests that at one point were kind of holding it together have kind of frayed and kind of come apart, and now it's very, very regional. Where if one of the things I can pride myself on is I've fished from coast to coast. So as far as you can go east in Canada, I've caught fish off those waters. As far west as you can go in Canada, I've caught fish off those waters. And if I'm in Haida Gwaii, fishing in the Hecate Strait or something like that, or I'm fishing off what used to be the Queen Charlotte Islands, if I'm out there, I don't really think of myself as being in Canada. I think of myself as being in British Columbia, or on the West Coast. Same thing if I'm in Newfoundland, right? I don't think of myself as being in Canada. I think of myself as being in Newfoundland. If you're in Saskatchewan, you're in Saskatchewan.
Fucking right, yeah.
Right? Like you don't think of, any connection to Ottawa or even to Alberta, and definitely not to like the west or east coast. You're just looking at fields far as the eye can see in every direction. Right? And I think there is that regionality. I think what happens is Canada doesn't have the population volume to balkanize. There's too much, like, if it did, then your northern communities, stuff like that rely on what system does exist are screwed. Like, they don't generate anything. Everything that they have, like, they would be cut off, essentially, unless they could develop some sort of economic means of survival.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's coming, right? Obviously, what the government is doing isn't helping a whole lot either. I think we're seeing a lot of that now, like at the federal level. But at the same time, like I don't see a scenario where Canada exists like 100 years from now in the state it exists now.
No, and I don't think the to your point about if all the help goes away and some places won't make it. As shitty as this might sound, I don't agree with universal basic income either. So I don't think that just because you live somewhere, you have a right to be propped up.
Yeah.
Like you have to go and you have to make something of your life, and you can't. And if all your life consists of is waiting for someone else to help you, man, what a fucking rotten way to live.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, part of the Canadian problem is instead of addressing these issues like Confederation, and instead of addressing issues like national sovereignty or anything like that, the government just pours money in to avoid having the conversations. I think Canada is due for, I don't know, a long look in the mirror, so to speak, and I think Alberta's doing what they're doing, because you have to eventually stand up and put some teeth behind your words and say, hey, look, this is the base economics of what's happening. And we want to say in how things are going. And I think every province to some degree wants that. I think leadership in Canada on the provincial level and on kind of the smaller levels, local levels and stuff like that, I don't want to say it's been infiltrated, even though it has to some degree, by actors from outside of Canadian interests to just kind of advance the interest of other nations within Canada. We know this. I mean, this is a fact. For sure. It's another thing our government refuses to address, right? Who are the 12 people that we know are compromised by China? Or is it 15 or 20 or how many?
And then when
right?
they're not, and then you can add to that number the number that are compromised by India.
100%. That's what I mean. Like
So-
these outside interests that tend to govern our country, but we don't talk about that. We don't have these hard conversations. And that's one of the things and the reasons why the U.S. is a different kettle of fish, is because those things are attacked at the state level with a huge amount of power to the state.
Yeah.
And then if the feds do try to get involved, it's only at the behest of the state, right? The feds just can't, impose things like that on things at the state level just because of the nature of the way that their government is set up. But like I said, I don't think we've had the hard questions and had these kind of internal dialogues where we really know what we are today. Like we've got this idea of what Canada is from a few points in history, but when we look at like what it is today and what it's going to be in the future, I don't think there's clear vision, and I don't think anybody has it. I applaud anybody who has a patriotic spirit, because I have friends and family who have fought for this country under that flag.
Yep, for sure.
And they lost people near and dear to them, and I would not cheapen their sacrifice.
Well, I don't think it cheapens their sacrifice to point out that the government doesn't fucking care about them.
No, not at all. I think that's painfully obvious, right?
So I think the people will always support.
Right. And I think those people have an idea, again, like we were talking about at the beginning, right? They have their idea of what the nation is. So if you're in the national military, right?
Well, you
see that part of the institution.
Well, not anymore. Not in this country.
Very much less so.
It's all woke and fucked up. But,
yeah.
Okay, so if I were to ask this question a different way, because you didn't really answer it, if there was a referendum on the idea of Alberta separating, a yes or no question, yes or no.
If they had a referendum tomorrow.
Sure. Yeah. And sure. Based on where we're at politically today and everything that's happening in the world, a yes or no question tomorrow.
Tomorrow, I would probably vote in favor of separation.
Yeah.
And I would vote in favor of separation for the reasons that I said, because you got to have some teeth, right? Like if what did Quebec call it? Distinct society, I think they called it.
Yeah.
Right. And
a nation within a nation.
Yeah. Quebec still might separate.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have. Like, I think that's what I'm saying is we have nations within nations.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that if we looked at the lack of leadership at the federal level, the inability for them to solve regional problems, much less national or international problems, I don't see any issue with handing way more power to the provinces to deal with what the government surely can't, right? Or seems too inept or unable to do or unwilling to do. And I think that...
Well, I don't think seems is the right... Like, they are obviously inept and incapable.
Well, the thing is I don't think they are. It's like when you look at the fires in LA, right? It's not like they couldn't have cleaned up the brush, filled the reservoirs. They just didn't. And whether that's malice or stupidity, and probably a little bit of both, like Canada's in much the same boat, right?
Well, sure, because, you know, whether it's their extreme ideology about climate change and this and that, and, you know, that's the altar they're worshiping. Like, that's their golden calf right now is climate change down there. That's what they're worshiping. So it's easy to point at it, but they did everything possible to make sure it would burn. Like, if you look at like the recklessness of...
Well, maybe a bit of self-fulfilling prophecy there,
for
right?
Sure.
Like, yeah. And like, I don't want to be a doomsayer, right? I would prefer to have, you know, I got family coast to coast. Like I said, that's part of why I've fished coast to coast. Yeah. I wouldn't want to say that we're not part of the same nation, because I believe that we are. Like, we touched on this talking with Mike. I do believe that there is a Canadian identity.
I don't think Alberta,
to some degree.
I don't think Alberta going their own path. I think politically it causes some black eyes, but I think coast to coast, that doesn't change who Albertans are, and it doesn't change how Albertans feel about the rest of the people in the country. Like, it's kind of like if you look at the states and how much power each individual state has. You know, people from Ohio aren't hating on the people in California.
Everybody hates California.
Well, sure. Maybe bad example, but what I mean is that they're not like, oh, those people, you know,
they're
not
not
like
us.
People
from Iowa, right? Like,
whether we are in full control of our from the borders inwards and everything that happens here.
Yeah,
it doesn't change the humanity part of like caring about your, you know, other people around the country. That doesn't change. It's not like it's suddenly like, oh, everybody in Alberta.
I don't think it will happen because of the interests involved.
Yeah.
The power, the money and the power at play is too big, right? There's also something that a lot of people, that people on that Alberta independence movement, and you know, if you start working in that talk of the 51st state, if there was any destabilization or breakup or balkanization in Canada, I'm of the opinion that that's when you would see the U.S. annexing. Yeah. Because like there's this big swath of land between them and their other state called Alaska. Yeah. That, you know, why should I have to pay you to pipeline Alaskan oil? You know, it'd be a whole lot easier if that was all just America. Yeah. And that's been something, that's why we built the railroad, right? Because it was claiming the West, right? We wanted to get to the West Coast before the American government did, right? Before they could put troops over there. Yeah. At least that's to my understanding. But it's one of those things that I don't think will happen on the big scale. And it's when a lot of people talk about like, you know, about major failures in the world. Like there's a possibility of the grid going down, and there's a possibility of apocalyptic things happening. But when we talk about how much power and money and stuff is involved and all that stuff, the interest is to keep it going. The interest is to have it collapse, right? And preparing for the worst is always the best course of action. But when I look at kind of who's got their hand on the yoke, they're not just going to bow out and be like, let it all collapse, because that's their creation. That's their power. That's their world, right? And things would have to get like pretty messed up for those guys to just like cash out of the casino and walk away with their like, okay, we're done. If they start doing that, Like if you start noticing the billionaires hopping on Elon Musk's shit, heading for Mars, and it's a whole big thing about them digging these big bunkers and shit like that to live in. Even though it says in the Bible that you can't hide underground, literally says like they will hide underground. And God's like, yeah, you can't hide from me. But there's a lot of that mentality where we look to this radical change as opposed to looking at something more practical. Like, one of the things that I always thought about when people get into this whole, like, the survivalist mindset.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what if the grid goes down? I'm like, well, that's a real problem. Like, that would be terrible. So we don't have hot and cold running water anymore. You don't have power. You don't have all that stuff.
There's no podcast.
Right. Exactly. What a horrible world. And people are like right away going into their own little shell. Right. So I'll build my community and we'll be self-reliant and resilient and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's cool. That's probably a good plan to have short term. But like, shouldn't we just build resilience into those systems? Like, if we, us as a community, we're like, we want to survive. Well, shouldn't we make sure we got a whole bunch of people who know how to work in the power plant? Maybe like a whole bunch of people who know how to, like, a whole bunch of linemen to run power lines. Because if something happens, then we can start rebuilding it. Maybe have spare generators, like on the macro scale. Maybe manufacture the generators and the transformers and stuff in Canada instead of China. Like, shouldn't we, like, build resilience into the grid so that if stuff happens,
you would think, but
like, shouldn't the guys who run the sewage treatment plant be like the most important people in your community? So, like, make sure nothing happens to those people. Like, we don't want them getting sick. We don't want them, like,
that whole infrastructure should be like solar flare proof. Like,
yeah, or at the very least, like, it should be like, hey, what are you taking in school? No, you're going to learn how to build power plants, and you're going to learn how to run the sewage treatment plant, because those things are pretty important in society. But
I don't think the kids today aren't coming up through school like with their eyes fixed on that. I mean,
no, but nobody's watching that. And that's one of those things that when we talk about, like, preparation for the big scheme of things, right? People get focused on their what can I affect in my own world? But it's like, well, if us as a community got together and said, we want to build our community resilience, well, where does our power come from? Like, couldn't we generate our own power? Couldn't we, make sure our own water's clean? That seems to make more sense to me, but that doesn't seem to happen on any level, not on the municipal level, the provincial level, the federal level. There's the whole...
It's more fun to weaponize it for profit and votes.
Oh, yeah, exactly, right? Like, what was it, the prorogation of Parliament that just happened? There was, like, a huge native water thing bill that just, like, died on the paper, and it's like, so again, for, like, the millionth time, the Liberal government just like, yeah, we'll get you some clean water. No, hold on. We need to retain power. We'll get you clean water maybe next year, maybe the year after.
Sorry about your water, but the CRA is still going to enforce the capital gains tax that died on the floor.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole increase. Like, that's how,
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that the provincial government or a smaller government of scope couldn't do better with getting communities clean water.
I personally, I think in Alberta that we talked about it in the last podcast about repatriating national parks. Sure. I think we should repatriate the reserves too. Bring them under provincial control, because then I think what you would do is you would have provincial money, provincial interests, and like why are they? I don't know how long you would want the federal government lying to you.
A couple hundred years, apparently.
Yeah, so far it's been forever. So yep. I just think things could be so much better.
Yeah, still doing deals with the crown, and I can't imagine King Charles cares too much about what's happened in Hobbema or Horse Lake. Or
I think he's more worried about his good buddy, Ghislaine Maxwell and some of these other high-profile people.
Yeah, yeah, it's a wild time, man, and that's the thing. Like, so many cards are being held against their chest, and people are getting ready to play them, and the whole world's kind of waiting with bated breath to see what Donald Trump is going to do. And
I think it's going to be a banger of a first few days, because I think he's definitely I think he'll come out swinging.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like in a way that like, I don't mean World War type swinging, but I mean like everything he said he's going to do, that man will probably act on it fairly quickly. I think because I think he's cognizant of like, you got 2 years to get some things happening here.
Yeah.
You're into midterm elections, they can only serve 2 terms. Right.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
So
I think he's already said, or at least his son has already said that like after this, like he's already thinking about year 4.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I'm done at that. Like, even if I could, I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
Because he's getting up in age and it's, whatever.
78?
Yeah, something like that. But I mean, like, yeah, he's got no desire to do that. And I think there's just so much to be fixed. I think one of the things that really got exposed in the last few years, and that's what I mean, like, prior to this, there was a framework by which nations and the whole world kind of was governed by these like big think tanks, and they were mostly in lockstep with how the world would go. You had a few outliers like China and stuff like that, but they even got them in lockstep to some degree, right? But I think in recent history, and that's probably just within the last 10 years, you saw these things where maybe they call it the rise of the technocrats, where you've got something that came along like social media and it changed the game, where now those groups were no longer in control of the narrative. They were no longer in control of what people thought or how people could access the economy or different economies, right? So now things get dynamic. Now things get wild. So these old structures that kind of held everything up, and they're like, we're just going to ride this out until we get to, whatever their end game is. That's all under threat.
Yeah.
Right. Because things are changing dynamically. You've got guys like Elon and, some other people who are doing their own thing, and they're not beholden to these old school power structures anymore.
Well, no. And the other thing that is harder to, erase now is like, if it's on the internet now, it's forever, and AI can find it. So, it wasn't that many years ago if something came out and then, they wanted to cover it up, they could literally just shred all the files, burn the hard drives, get the state media to erase whatever they had, and okay, well, it's gone. You don't hear about it. Now everything's forever. So as soon as something comes out, it's on the internet. It's never going away. It's captured somewhere. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the big things.
So it forces, there's a certain level of accountability that comes with that now. And I don't think the repercussions of that have not been realized yet.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, we're at the cusp now of quantum computing. So I believe that Google, is it Gemini or whatever? So their quantum computer, has reached the point now where they're saying, like, once quantum computing becomes able, it will become able to bypass all encryption. So all the information in the world and all the world's national databases, defense, all that stuff will now be available online.
Yeah.
Quantum computers will make anything that's not quantum encrypted basically open source. So, I mean, no one knows what the future looks like. No one knows AI, quantum computing, the next step. And you know who Ian Carroll is?
I know the name, but
he's a Instagram, TikTok guy. Kind of gets into the conspiracy theory stuff. He did a thing today, and I'll try and link it in the description, where he goes on, like, as of today, what's happening in the world. And it's just wild, man. Like, There's like a new UFO whistleblower that's supposed to drop like some real stuff tonight. And you've got Trump being inaugurated. He was going to be outside in the National Mall. So they had 10,000 chairs, and they spent 2 months putting up bleachers and all that stuff. They had to tear it all down. He moved everything into the White House today.
Wow.
Like, why'd they move it inside? So there's lots of speculation about why they moved it inside. Like, internationally, you've got pretty insane stuff happening. Obviously, Ukraine, Gaza, China.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so much going on right now, and we're not even a month into 2025. And it's like I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen. But I mean, how much do you really need to know?
Yeah.
Be prepared. Hug your loved ones. Have some food, some candles, some ammo, some.
There's nothing you can do about it, anyways. Like at this point,
yeah, good community, and yeah, man, the things are moving at such a big. It's like the big wheel is turning.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, what's that mean? Like,
well, and again, and I think people get caught up in that, and it's like, well, you can study that and go down every rabbit hole, and really it doesn't mean anything. Did you do your push-ups today? Do you have food in the fridge? Did you spend time with your kids? Like, if a lot of people, I think they get caught up in it and they miss the world as it's going by. They forget to take some time to live.
Yeah, 100%. Because for none of us, tomorrow is not promised for any of us, right? So, are you going to regret, not, seeing that latest tweet from somebody or checking the latest rage farm or whatever? I don't think so. You're going to, enjoy the time with your family, enjoy the time living your life. And by all means, make small incremental improvements every day, because your life is just like that system. It's just like that airline. It's just like the government. It's just like everything else. If you're not improving, you're getting worse.
Yeah. And
it's all like that. And for us, we all have an expiration date, whatever that is. And adding, not necessarily quantity of life, but quality of life is really what it's all about. Because that's just the way the world is, right? We're looking for angels. We're finding lions and lion stock everywhere. Not saying there's not angels. I believe there is. I believe there's good in the world. And I think we should aspire to that, aspire as high as we can, as far as being good people and being a benefit to our community and all that stuff. And who knows, maybe that good person is out there that's going to change somebody's life today.
Well, I think they are. I think it's just often overlooked. I think there's as much good in the world as there is bad.
Sure.
But the bad stands out more. And it's easier to pay attention to the bad.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to be
louder.
Yeah, on the macro scale.
Yeah, it stands up higher, it's louder, it's brighter, it's flashier. Whereas regular good people and good things happening, that's just kind of like, we take it for granted, like it's expected. So
yeah, and I think when people they get in that position where they're going to do some good in the world, maybe they are doing that big altruistic thing. I think they meet with a lot of opposition, man. It's definitely there's conflicts happening at much higher levels. There's definitely that. The Bible talks about the war in heaven, and I think we see that because the higher you go, there just seems to be conflict, right? I think the places where there's not conflict is at that interpersonal level, right? So,
well, I think, because the higher you go in any power structure, the more entrenched the belief system is.
Sure.
It got to be what it is through conflict. And so anytime you get higher in it, it's worse. Right? The arguments are it's just fucking worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And the people who ascend tend to be people who are good at conflict.
Yeah.
Either by, implied violence, direct violence, or strategy, just thinking quicker than the other guy and being able to move quicker and mass resources to get something moving. And that's strangely enough, I think that's one of the things that's going to keep us together. I think that's one of the things that keeps things from falling apart is if everybody just suddenly was like kumbaya and loving each other. I think a lot of these systems would just crumble and it'd be like mass chaos, because I think that competitive nature, I think that adversarial effect that human beings have on each other, I think that's part of drive. I think that's part of what keeps things going. What keeps people getting up in the morning, even if it's just like yourself, right? You're getting up in the morning, you're looking in the mirror and you're going, I want to fix this. I don't like this about myself. I want to do this better, right? Oh, that fucking thing I did yesterday that I shit the bed on, I got to get better at that. We have those relationships with ourselves, and that helps drive us and make us a little bit better. But it's only when we are honest and open and transparent with ourselves and with each other that we can have those conversations. Like, I think Canada could be a fantastic nation if we could have real conversations and a real vision for what the country is. I just don't think that's going to happen anytime soon because, like you said, entrenched positions.
Yeah.
So here we are.
It's wild.
All right, man. Yeah, we got some cool stuff coming. I think we got some kind of guests online that people will enjoy.
Yep.
And yeah, man. I think if there's anything else that you had
no, man,
bring up.
I don't. I could rant about all kinds of angry things, but no, I don't. I'm good, man.
But you guys do have you got a pistol course coming in February?
Oh yes, yeah. I guess if anyone's looking for training, so February 7th, we have a level 2 pistol class, so you have to have done level 1, the holster certification before that. And then on the February 8th, which is a Saturday, there's skills and drills. March 7th, there's a level. No, hold on, rewind. February 21st is another level 1 class, so that's holster certification. March 7th is level 3, which is kind of what would you call it? Driving your gun, pistols.
Yeah, a little more applied basics.
Yeah, once it's in the game, how to keep it up and running.
Oh, nice.
Reloads and malfunctions, that kind of stuff.
Put the thing in the thing and pull the thing.
100%, man. And
nice.
Then the day after that, March 8th, is another skills and drills. And then, then we're just kind of starting to brainstorm what our summer training program will look like. So that's what's kind of coming up.
Yeah. For myself, I'm kind of putting together something for a live event. So I'm looking at a couple venues right now, talking to some people, seeing what that might look like scheduling wise, where I'll, pull out some of this, some of the writing that I've done and read some in public and see if anybody wants to, come listen and check out some live poetry and we'll see, try and schedule. I'm looking for something possibly around February, March, depending on how soon I can how soon I can talk to somebody into a venue. So, but it's the ball has started rolling. So that's
it's something
exciting and scary at the same time. So.
All this stuff takes a long time to kind of put in motion, man. There's a lot of planning and behind the scenes stuff that kind of goes into it. So
yeah, well, and a lot of it is just the procrastination and you're kind of like, yeah, I'll totally do that. And you start going like, there's some
it's easier
hurdles to overcome, right?
It's easier to not do it.
Yeah, 100%. But if you don't do it, then you never know if you can do it.
That's a fact. All right, so you can find us obviously here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, CastBox. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps drive the algorithm. Follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook. Check out our website at thegreatrange.com where you can find every episode of the podcast, the blog, merch, such as the shirts that we're rocking, the new hoodie that's out. It's all on there. And then you can also buy the new book, Whiskey Painted Holocaust. And that is it, I think.
About it, man.
All right.
Well, thanks a lot, dude.
Yeah, cheers, bro.
Cheers.